could imagine eventually that becoming a little bit sore.
Yes, I do cut regularly there.
Yeah, and how do you do that at the moment?
Scissors.
Okay.
Scissors and a pumice.
Yeah. There's a whole variety of devices, should we say, for removing hard skin.
I'm a cheapskate.
Most of them work in some form or another, but they tend to be quite superficial. But I'm going to do those. I'm literally going to treat you. You do need a bit of care, as I would do any other patient, and start removing some hard skin quite painlessly. So what we're doing at the moment is sort of very conventional chiropody, and tidying numbers of bits and pieces up sensibly. Now, a fairly conventional way of smoothing anything out is to use these sort of foot dressery type things. Now, I don't tend to use these at all, as they're very slow, and actually it's not terribly comfortable to keep doing this sort of business. So this is where my own kit comes in handy here. So this is basically a nail file, but slightly posher. And
is that something you only use on nails? You wouldn't use that on the skin?
Yeah, I'll come to that.
Right, okay.
Because there's a couple of bits of kit here. One bit of kit I described as my right hand bit of kit, really.
Toe on that foot.
Yeah.
In between there and the little toe, hard skin build up quite regularly that I have to cut because that becomes.
So let's go about this in a couple of ways. First things first. Conventionally, chiropodists use scalpels and all the lot just for removing parts. Do this by way of sort of contrast almost. So effectively, most of this is superficial, but it's really rather overly developed. So leap of faith, sit there while I take a very sharp blade to you.
I have to cut myself quite regularly.
I'd imagine you're doing this every week or two.
If I'm running, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you notice it becoming sore.
Yes.
At that point.
Yeah, the balance. Well, not the balance goes, but it becomes more difficult to walk properly.
Right. Yes, in actual fact, when you look at this one here, it's beginning to just form a little deeper area here, which is the sort of thing that does cause the discomfort. I always think of this as whittling. You don't really need to be trying to reduce this to entirely smooth pink skin, because if you do that it's just sore really. So you're taking it to a certain level that's still leaving you with some protection, but has removed the surplus. When we're working, we're blithely cutting away, but what we're doing is we're just observing quietly the change in colour. So as it begins to look less yellow, you know you're coming somewhere near to where you should be. Oh, here's quite a nice meaty lump under here.
Yes, that's the one I can't get to.
Yeah.
Those bits on the side.
This is certainly something that I suppose if there's an expertise in foot care generally, this is something you've actually got to be very good with your scalpel technique to be any good to anybody. Okay, so colour's beginning to return to this. Now, what I'm going to use is my secondary bit of kit, because I've taken great lumps of dead skin off here, but it's a kind of fairly irregular sort of surface. So this will feel cold and wet. And it is effectively a whetstone grinder. Relatively recent bit of kit, which has taken the place of using a dry burr, which has the disadvantage of generating great heat if you look down. But the combination of damp and speed actually finishes the area off really quite well. It also highlights any other areas that might be still a problem.
Was it just blasting out a jet of water as you were using them? Is that?
Yes, that's right.
Is that to sort of clear the debris, I suppose? Or?
Yeah, what it's doing is it's just literally, there's a very fine mist coming out of that. So can hardly see it. It is there.
Oh yeah.
Put it up against that. So that's cooling this bit, natural fact. But it's cooling.
Right, so that stops it getting too hot.
It's cooling the
does it?
skin, and it also, in actual fact, is softening the skin slightly as well.
Okay.
So
does that help it remove skin?
It does, and that's
right.
what I was saying earlier on. With very, very craggy skin, it's a very kind way of getting rid of it. If you're trying to cut that with a scalpel, you're dragging on the skin the whole time, because even the sharpest blade in the world is going to drag. So that, yeah, basically that it's coming through there. It's an adjustable flow.
Right.
Once you've found the right setting, you tend to stick with it, because sometimes you either drown the patient or it's not coming through enough.
And is it only ever water that comes through that? You can't sort of run sort of other things that might help.
You can use a kind of almost a detergent surfactant in it as well, if you want to. But mostly just one of the major issues for home treatment is that people will often try to remove skin while it's still too damp. Skin needs to be quite hard to actually make it work properly. And there's a tendency after a bath when the skin sort of
when I would normally
moisten, kind of sort of rubbery bits come off it then. But it's actually not removing anything very much, because the keratin has swollen up with the water, and so it's only a very small amount of skin coming away. So a type of hardish dry skin, particularly for normal buffing down, is better to work with. It's more effective to buff that than it is a moist skin. No, probably not, because just there's a couple of little circumscribed areas down here that could just be like little corny development. Now, what I'm going to do is give that a rest for a moment, because what I'd quite like to happen is for the colour to return normally to the skin after you've been working on it. I'm going to move on to this side. Now what I'm going to do on this side is actually going to use my machine first. Back to the machine for a minute. This is cold. Warning before I actually spray this stuff on. That's putting a little dressing layer over where I've removed the skin.
So what does this stuff do?
This is really to stop friction and to some extent pressure. It's very thin, so it fits inside most footwear, but it's basically, we are for argument's sake thinking that Sue's lesions have been much more sore than they have been,
right?
And they would be very sensitive once you've taken off that hard skin, because of loss of protection. So this would be basically an extra protection, like putting a little layer of skin on for a moment. This stuff's very handy, and it will provide a degree of cushioning. And you just slip it over the toe so it sort of sits down in between, and you can wear this home today because I've made it for you.
Thank you very much.
It's quite a handy little device. Other times you might, if it's a more chronic problem, you might mould something in silicone. You have to get those just right, otherwise they're not comfortable.
Yeah, it was a lot less painful than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
In fact, it was so light, I actually wondered if anything was happening at one point.
Is it sort of a more extreme version of something you do at home?
It's probably less
precise.
abrasive than
Right.
I do at home.
Would you use at home? Scissors?
Scissors and a paste stone, so I'm really cutting into it and then really going for it. But then it's a bit like a wet and dry stone, so you've got the water.
Do people ever have it, because you talk about hard skin a lot, but do people ever have issues with softer parts of their feet that they need treating, or skin removing from those parts? Is that less common, or?
Generally speaking, anything that's affecting some of the softer skin and areas are usually things like warts and verrucas. And this is actually a callus plane, and it has a revolving blade here. And the design was to go through particularly thick and heavy callus in actual fact. So this would whiz around. I don't have a machine now to attach this to, but that would whiz around. It would kind of strip away basically industrial diamond and tungsten carbide.
Okay.
So they're fairly pricey actually.
So do they get used quite often, or are they?
This one, as you can see, hardly at all. That would be when I've got somebody with enormously thick, cracked, hard skin, particularly around the heel. This one and the one that's actually in the machine at the moment are the more standard grade. This is an umbrella burr, but there was something I don't have now, but there was something called the Moore's disc, and they were like minute sanding discs that went into the end of a clipped shaft. And again, that would be used in this sort of fashion, rotating very fast.
So you'd use the flat side of that as opposed to the edge of it.
Yeah. Now, that's another point, you see, because again, used carefully, okay.
Yeah.
Same with the, if you can imagine a miniature sanding disc you might use in the workshop. Catch people with the edge of it, absolute murder. They're interchangeable, so they could do both jobs.
Right.
Viably. And before we had this secondary bit of kit, we would rely on our normal drill with a whole variety of tips in it, in actual fact.
And do you ever use sort of like I know you put the pads onto Sue's feet? Do you ever use sort of soft versions of these that I suppose you could say buff?
No, I wouldn't, but your average nail artist would.